Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Another version of Live with Phil, September 2016. And no, it's not Live with Phil, it's Live with Phil. So, how's everybody doing? If you're doing well, just nod your head. Thank you for nodding your head. I'm glad I can see all of you. I can't see all of you, I'm just kidding. So, this one we're talking about excellence in the workplace. And I've been working with CCAR now for 17 years and have had before that had many different jobs and many different professions. So what I thought I'd do is just um, talk about what I think and what our leadership here at CCAR deems excellence in the workplace. And sometimes I take things for granted, things like common sense and work ethic, and sometimes you come across people that don't really seem to have much of either. I mean, not that might sound a little harsh, but if you don't know what you don't know, and so this is kind of a lot of this will seem really obvious to people, um, but I think it's also a great learning to put these kinds of thoughts into writing and to talk about them consistently in the workplace so that everybody's on the same page. So I got this fancy new mouse that I'm trying to work with my thumb and all that, and Stacy's trying to convince me to do that. So let's get into this. And this is a document that we have shared with the employees at CCAR, and it's posted right outside of uh, Jolie LeBron's office, the director of administration, and our human resources officer, so people can see it all the time. Let's just run through it and see what our thinking was. So, where I wanted to start with is what's the baseline? Because a lot of times, what is expected just as a baseline. These are like where the bar is set, and these are the standards, the minimums, the baseline of what we expect from employees. And frankly, it's what I expect from myself, whether I'm the executive director of the Connecticut Community for Addiction Recovery, or I am, a short order cook at a part time at a golf course restaurant. I mean, these are some of the things that I think every person who becomes employed needs to know. So the first one is know your job. What is it there that your employer is asking you to do? Review the job description and performance appraisal and do what is required. So CCAR has written job descriptions, and it's very important to know what your job description is and what we're expecting of you. I think that recovery community organizations all ought to have a comprehensive personnel policies and procedures. I know a lot of nonprofits and even startup recovery community organizations don't even have personnel policies and procedures. CCAR didn't for the first few years. One of the first things I did when I became executive director in 2004 was to draft one, and we actually hired a consultant to do that, and we abide by them. And Jolie is very good as the human resources officer when situations arise to draw our attention to the personnel policies and procedures and abide by them. They've also been tested over the years, and they've been adapted and adjusted a couple times as we learn and grow. So it's important for personnel policies and procedures. Uh, our organizational culture, it has five foundational principles. We believe in multiple pathways, err on the side of the recovery, err on the side of being generous, believe in the recovery potential of an individual, not the pathology, and you are in recovery when you say you are. And so those are kind of what we believe, along with our vision and mission, is which is all about putting a face on recovery and providing recovery support services. What is your organizational culture that you work with? Can you describe that to an individual? As Art Woodard would often say, can you describe that to your 8-year-old grandson? What is your organizational culture? And we expect employees to know that. Understand and heed personal boundaries with staff, volunteers, and recoveries, which are the people we serve. That's what we like to call them. And so this, I think I could probably, Stacy, do a whole live with Phil session on boundaries and personal boundaries. But let me just suffice it to say that any times that we've had any employee difficulties over the 17 years that I've been with CCAR, it's usually some type of boundaries were not heeded well and or not followed. And lines got crossed, whether it was love relationships, friendships, or just uh, there were so many different things. It's hard to describe. So, what are the personal boundaries? And if you're not sure, ask a supervisor or draft the policies and procedures so you know what those are. Um, when in doubt, I would always say err on the side of being cautious. And if things are getting uh, and talk about things that feel uncomfortable. If they're feeling uncomfortable, there's probably a reason. I talked about reviewing our vision and mission regularly, and I encourage employees to always look at that. I mean, there's so much material in CCAR and probably within your organization that has vision and mission. Can you as an employee talk about it? Do you know what it is that the agency believes? All right, here's one that's pretty straightforward, and you would think common sense, but it says a lot if you're always punctual. I learned early on in one of my stints as a salesman, it was much better to be 30 minutes early than 5 minutes late, especially for a sales call. And I believe that about work. It's better to be early than it is to be late. When you say you're going to be at work, be there. Be punctual. Work when you're supposed to work. So when you're actually on the clock do your job. Manage your time well. Prioritize. How much work are you getting done? Very straightforward, very simple. A lot of times we run into difficulty with concepts as simple as this. We have an Outlook calendar in CCAR, and all our employees can access it. We suggest and we really want people to use the Outlook calendar regularly. And we want it has to be shared with all the other employees. That way we know where you are, we know where other people are. We can also help with scheduling meetings and that kind of thing. Use the Outlook calendar. It's not a big deal, it's straightforward. The reason we like the Outlook calendar too is that it can update to our smartphones. So that's why I like it. I can just type anything in on my smartphone or on my Outlook calendar, and both places are updated. And it helps me not miss things because I get overscheduled a lot of times. Straightforward, meet the deadlines that are required. If you have reports due or you have a presentation due and it's due by a certain date, meet that. And if you think you're not going to meet it, talk to somebody way ahead of time, not the day it's due. We always ask that employees be honest. Honesty is a key part of recovery. I remember, when we talk about the Recovery Coach Academy, we have this little module on ethics, and it's about Ricardo. And Ricardo doesn't want to disclose his lapse, and honesty always comes up. So if something's happened, we want it goes a lot better with me as an executive director, and I'm sure with your supervisor, that if you're honest about something or a situation or a mistake or a violation of the personnel policies and procedures, whatever, it will probably go better if you're honest about it. We ask you to work well with your supervisor and respect the organizational hierarchy. You have somebody supervising you for a reason, and in a lot of ways, it's a way to distribute work. And so it's important to respect that hierarchy, work well with it. refrain from gossip. And that's not only a workplace suggestion, it's also uh, it's a spiritual practice as well. That my grandmother always said, if you don't have something nice to say about somebody, don't say anything at all. And I know that we can all get into times where there's a fine line between gossip and letting people know what's going on with another employee. But I think you can sense in yourself and intuitively when it's gossip and refrain from that. It doesn't do anybody any good. If you're following me and you agree, just shake your head or raise your hand. Oh, thank you for all that support. I appreciate it. We expect staff to be culturally aware that we want to promote a diverse working environment. And we're not saying that you're going to become culturally competent and know everything about someone else's culture. And even in the Recovery Coach Academy, I've come to the conclusion that I will never be culturally competent. I don't even know enough about my own culture to know enough about somebody else's to consider myself competent in that culture. But when we do talk, what we do strive to become is competent in all the relationships that we have. And Art Woodard also talks about, can we create a culture that is responsive enough to include everybody or competent enough to include everybody? So that's what we're shooting for at CCAR, is to create a culture that's competent to include everyone and respect and value everybody within that culture and treat everyone as resources, not as objects. Treat each other as resources. We're all in this together. So we also noticed that people always answered phones a different way too. So we're talking about having proper telephone etiquette. And this to me is kind of common sense, but when you actually listen to people answer the phones, it's a lot different for a lot of different people. And we like to say, thank you for calling CCAR. How may I help you today? And that seems to be pretty straightforward. Not just a simple hello, what's going on, or hey, and you gotta. We are conducting an an operation, a business, and oftentimes the person answering the phone is the very first person they'll talk to. So you only have one chance to make a first impression. Um, that applies to proper email etiquette too. Be polite and professional in your email writings, and that can get a little tricky. But you sometimes you can come when rushed, you might come across as being short and abrupt and maybe downright rude. Be careful with that. Take the time to craft a respectful email, and that just goes while you're in the workplace. Be polite, be courteous, be respectful at all times while you're working. All common sense things to me, anyway. And I'm still trying to figure out the mouse so I can go to the next slide. Practice self control. And that just is really keep your emotions in check as best you can, and straightforward. Keep your work environment clean. I think it says a lot if you go into someone's office and there's uh, books and mail piled up all over the desk, and Stacy's laughing because actually that's my desk, and she thinks that's pretty funny. But I don't really like. Yeah, well, we'll just skip that one then. Keep your work environment clean. I think it's also important to dress appropriately. Uh, we believe that crisp, casual business attire is always suitable. Uh, and that's just a way that we want to conduct our agency, especially if you're going to be on like television or in front of the media. You might want to think about having some kind of gear or logo, like we have the CCAR logo on black polos. That's very suitable to be on TV, so that you people are aware of what your logo is. Um, so solve your own problems whenever possible. And Tom Kirk, who used to be the former commissioner of the Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services in Connecticut, he was always open to people bringing forward problems, and however, uh, he also wanted possible solutions. So I like that kind of idea that, yeah, we all run across problems. A lot of our day is solving problems. I solve my own whenever possible. However, if it's a little big for me, then I might ask other people, what is it you think about this? What are some possible solutions? I have my ideas. What do you think about this solution? We love people that take initiative and that they're self-starters, that they see a project or they're given a task, they take the initiative to address that project, and that's what's meant by being a self-starter. You don't need to have your hand held to manage a project. You can do it on your own. Another thing that we like is you don't have to spend a lot of time discussing it with other colleagues, because if as you take that time to discuss it with other colleagues, you're taking away from their time to do their work. So all of a sudden, if you're talking with three or four other colleagues about a certain project or program, you're also taking their time as well, and you're slowing overall production down, never mind your own. Yeah, Blair, I agree. It's about knowing what's exactly in each pile too. But so obviously, when I go back to this slide and talk about keeping your work environment clean, I'm kind of, talking to myself right there with that one, and that's usually the case, isn't it? There's usually something that rings true for me that I can improve on. So that was the baseline. That last slide was the baseline, the end of the baseline. These are just kind of some of the basic things that we expect from individuals to perform adequately, to perform well at their job. So, what is it though that when we start, okay, this is the baseline, how can people excel in their jobs? How can they really get ahead? How can they be looked at as self starters, people who take initiative, people that were looking to advance and grow within your agency or even in the field in general? And here are some of those things. Exceed your goals. Now, hopefully, you have a job description. You also have a performance appraisal. And in that performance appraisal, you might understand that there's some goals that you need to do or accomplish. Exceed those goals. Do more than is required. Go the extra mile. Go above and beyond. And when people do that, it really shows. The third one is also really important to me, and I've said this a lot in public settings and meetings, is that when I'm involved in the hiring process, and I'm not involved as much as I used to be, that one of the key ingredients I look for in a viable candidate is, do they have gratitude? Will they be grateful to have a job, grateful to work in the field of recovery, grateful to work for CCAR specifically, grateful to have an opportunity to do the job they're doing? And if they maintain that attitude, they're really a joy to work with. And they become much more teachable. I try to maintain my gratitude, and I hope I remain teachable that way. People love other people who are eager and enthusiastic, who are willing to take on more things, eager to grow, love what they're doing. It's infectious in a lot of ways. So if you can be one of those enthusiastic, joy-filled people that with a good sense of humor, then I think you have you've come a long way to achieving excellence. Always commit to learning and growing. If you find yourself becoming bored or stuck with the work you're doing, then maybe you're not learning, and maybe you're not growing, and maybe it starts to rub off on what other people are seeing and experiencing about you. So we always believe that the commitment to more learning and more growth is really, it's really a life process, never mind just a work process. It's also a recovery process, that we're always learning and growing in recovery. One of the things that you can always learn to do, and I try to get better and better at this as I become more and more seasoned as an executive director, if you will. That's just a nice way of saying getting old. Um, but can you encourage others and try to encourage someone. You can encourage someone each and every day. It's free, it's not all that difficult. And like anything else, you can become better and better at it as you practice it. Encourage others. We talked earlier about contributing new, useful, and well thought out solutions. So if you see something that's not working well and you have an idea, contribute those because that grows the agency, that improves the quality of the agency, improves the quality of the work. And that's also always improve. Don't think you've become the best at what you do. Always think that there's ways to get better. In any athletic profession, Michael Jordan played one way, but he always sought to improve, and he played a completely different way at the end of his career, but he was still effective because he grew, he learned, he improved. Understand what those challenges are, seek appropriate help. Do you need to go back to school? Do you need to take additional training? Can you learn more from your supervisor? All those kinds of things. I think that you need to believe passionately in what you do. Is this work fulfilling your purpose in life? I said often that um, my purpose is to carry the message of recovery. And since I've been back from the Appalachian Trail, I believe strongly that that was refined, that I believe my life's purpose is to coach recovery because I'm really a fan of all those attributes to being a coach and what that entails. If you are not passionate about your work and saying if you're recovery, if you don't believe passionately in helping others achieve recovery, then I would actually question, is this the right place for you? Where is your passion? And follow that because that's really what a meaningful life is about. When you can partake in work that is really fulfilling your purpose, that is a rewarding life. And many people don't ever find that. I encourage you to look for that. Always be generous with your time and talent because you've been given talent, and the way to use that is to contribute your time using that talent. And whether that's inside the workplace or outside the workplace, I consider one way to achieving excellence is to be generous. And always look to the quality of your work. Is that the best you can do? Is that the report, the best report you can write? Is that presentation you're about to give the best presentation you can give? How did you interact at that meeting today? Is was it useful, insightful? That was it helpful? And those are the kinds of things that we want. Generate quality. I think this next piece is, especially for CCAR, and this is pertains to CCAR, it pertains to other recovery community organizations, that you're representing yourself as an individual, but don't let it stop there, because you're also, if you work for a recovery community organization, if you work for CCAR, you're also a role model and an ambassador for CCAR, for the Connecticut Community for Addiction Recovery. But even greater than that, and I think this is really has helped temper what everything I do and how I present in public, is that I'm a role model for the recovery community as well. And we have to live, we have to act, we have to work to that standard. Part of that is always taking care of oneself. That we have to really embrace self care as well. That if we're out there unhealthy or distributing poor behaviors or and just working ourselves to the bone and walking around tired and bedraggled and um, you're also, that doesn't really coincide with the idea that you're a role model for the recovery community. What is that picture that people see? You might be the first representative of the recovery community that a person ever sees. And finally, CCAR embraces this idea too that transformed people transform people. That whether you're a person in recovery, a family member, friend, or ally, that you've undergone some type of personal transformation, and this carries on to other people that in turn are transformed. It's a very spiritual idea, and I encourage you to explore about if you're looking to achieve excellence, how do I continually transform? How do I continually grow? What does this mean for me? What does it mean for others when they see us grow? And what does that do to carry the message of recovery? Finally, I want to we I've come to the conclusion. I used to call it hit, but then it evolved into right just recently. That I believe that when people ask CCAR why we're successful or why that funders are willing to invest more in us or what is our financial or sustainability plan, I simply say that CCAR conducts itself right. I try personally to conduct myself right. And so if CCAR is trying, and the leadership of CCAR, that includes all of us at CCAR, we're trying to model these five components that we are respectful of others, and not only of others, but of ourselves, that CCAR conducts itself with integrity. And that doesn't mean to say that your reputation won't take shots now and then. My reputation has taken shots. People take shots at me regularly. I know that they take shots at CCAR regularly. But if your core is true, that you're conducting yourselves with integrity, you can handle those shots. Your reputation, yes, might get tarnished at times, but I'm not going to step out in battle and protect the reputation because we're comfortable in knowing that our integrity is solid. We try to be generous in everything we do. Some people don't might not think we're as generous as they'd like to be. For example, like um, and some of the things we charge for our training, but that's also our integrity at work there too. Um, and I think I always go to what Bill White taught me early on. He says when it comes to like things like curriculum or products that you have, there's always things that you've developed that you give away, things that are negotiable and things that are non-negotiable. And in one way, if that's clear for everybody, that's maintaining your integrity, that's maintaining your generosity because you can give things away, and then under right situations you can scholarship people, say, to the Recovery Coach Academy. So it's also another way to think about conducting business too. And that to me is, I'm just going to jump to T, is about being transparent. I'll say that to people, what I just said about the things that we give away, things that are negotiable, things that we don't. And that's being transparent. You know where we stand, that's also being honest. So one of the ways that I think the state, like the Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services, which is our primary funder, and I believe we have a very solid working relationship with, is they know that about us, that we conduct ourselves right. Respect, integrity, generosity, honesty, and transparency. So that's basically, I've taken up a half hour of your time rambling on about the baseline for what we expect people to maintain in as employees of CCAR, what it is to achieve excellence, and how an agency and a person conducts themselves right. I also want to close with saying that I believe recovery community organizations are kind of under fire, maybe under scrutiny. People are really looking to poke holes in the necessity of recovery community organizations and recovery community centers. Let's always conduct ourselves right. Respect, integrity, generosity, honesty, and transparency. If we do that, I think we'll survive scrutiny to the point where I think we'll become a wanted and desirable resource in the community. So thank you for that. Didn't see any questions or responses in the chat box. So with that, I think we'll sign off and let you out and maybe go have a late lunch or an early lunch, depending where you are. And we'll talk soon. Take care, everybody.